Hey guys, let's talk about the HTTP client in Blazor WebAssembly. My current setup requires my apps to call multiple APIs, but that's not the out-of-the-box behavior of Blazor WebAssembly's template. So as you see here, the circles are for front-end Blazor WebAssembly applications. They're using shared components, and those components are using HTTP, the HTTP client to fetch or update data in their respective database through their API. So the HTTP calls between the petadopt components to the petadopt API and the petsocial components do HTTP calls to the petsocial API. Now I added this extra, this third API with its own components, which should do HTTP calls to the utils API. But now we'll have to find a way to, in these components, provide the backend URL to this API, and in these components, the backend URL to this API, and make sure the application is using the correct URL, so the correct HTTP client configuration when doing the separate calls. And that's a bit tricky. That's not the out-of-the-box behavior. So let's dive into the code. I have the utils shared SPA open and the configure services, which is similar as the program CS, but of a Razor class library. And out of the box, you'll see something like this. Services.add scoped a new HTTP client with the base address of pointing to your backend API. So in this shared library, I want to use the utils API URL, but let's say in the petsocial shared SPA, that's I would want to use the petsocial API URL. So this endpoint. And if we just leave it like that in both shared SPAs projects, and we then run the petsocial application, it's going to do going to use the HTTP client, but we can't really know for which calls it's going to use which URL if it's implemented like this. So let's take a look at, let's say, the Belgian Dogos SPA, which uses the petsocial shared SPA. So this Blazor WebAssembly project uses this shared Razor class library, which does HTTP calls to the petsocial API, but now also uses this shared API SPA that does HTTP calls to the utils API. So let's see in the program CS of Belgian Dogos SPA, you'll see it adds the utils shared SPA and the petsocial shared SPA. So that means both this one is, both this one would be added, and then in the petsocial, it would look like this, but then with another. And I don't know what exactly happens under the hood now if we would do it like that, whether it's only using the last HTTP client configuration, like it overrides, or it's just, yeah, I couldn't say what's actually happening, but that's the behavior at least. So if I now run this application, it's gonna attempt to do all the HTTP calls with the pet social API URL. So which this one? So I assume the order matters or it gets overwritten or whatever. So in this current, how it's currently configured, I can't access both APIs. Knowing that the calls would, yeah, the correct endpoints are used. So then you have a solution which is, oops, so we have it open. Let's see, you have named clients, a named HTTP client using the HTTP client factory. Let's take a look at that. And it basically, then you specify, so first you use the add HTTP client coming from the extension method Microsoft extensions.http. That's a NuGet package. And then you can specify it like this. So override base address, yeah, set the base address. And then you could in your component or in an existing service that you already made, inject the HTTP client factory and you create client with the name of which one you want to use. So let's take a look at that. I already did it for my existing services. So that would look like this. So first I have a local variable HTTP client. I inject the client factory. And then I fill this local variable with the specific named client. And that would work. However, I'll have to do this in every existing service that uses the HTTP client. And you have this string in here. I don't like that too much. It's kind of unfortunate that I would have to copy that over into every client. Then there's another possibility that's called the typed HTTP client. Let me see. Wait, it's not for my use case either. What you do here is you kind of make your own HTTP clients, injecting the Blazor HTTP client, but then specifying all your calls in it, and then register that by using the NuGet package again, add HTTP client, and then the class you of the type provided with that, and set the base address, client base address. And then you can just inject that newly made HTTP client and call it like that on your components or in your services. Just note that if you do it like this, you're only going to be able to access the public methods you provide. You won't be able to inject this weather forecast HTTP client and then do weather forecast HTTP client dot get from JSON async. Like you can't use the original HTTP client methods. You you'd probably be able to expose this and use it like that, but yeah, then you should. It would be probably safe to overwrite the base address in here as well. But then again, you'd have to do that for every service. So I have already existing services, like let's say the metric service. I don't feel like transforming this into an HTTP client and then instead of registering it as at scoped in here, I would have to register all those services as an HTTP client. Yeah, I don't feel like doing that. So maybe it's a way to do that, a feasible way to do that, but I wouldn't know what the implications are if I would, yeah, register every service I currently have as an HTTP client. Most of these services do HTTP calls, of course, so maybe that's not a problem, but I don't prefer it. So, what do I prefer? I've been playing around with it for some time now. I even made my own HTTP services to expose this created client from the client factory. But for some reason, I was still overwriting. Yeah, still getting 404s on my HTTP calls. There was still the front end was still using the wrong one. Just so was still only using one backend URL, API URL instead of both, or either incorrectly or just using one. And I don't want to be doing this in this line in every service, existing service. Okay, I really thought this would work, um, but it seems to have the same problem, which is that the HTTP clients just overwrite each other, or the last one is used instead of, even though they're named clients, but probably because I'm just using this HTTP client in here, it might not be getting the right one. Then I only have one more thing to try. If that doesn't work, I'm kind of stuck. Let's see. Someone here suggests to combine the two approaches, so to have a typed client and a named, to use both. Um, this might be an elegant solution, since this doesn't since I can just make a new class, put all of these things in, and then overwrite set the base address and more if I need to. Um, it's a more elegant approach, although I wonder. I wonder what to inject in my existing services. Probably this newly created client, like like how you use the typed HTTP clients. Anyway, this approach would make that I don't have to transform all my existing services into HTTP clients. So let's give that a go. This That's probably the implementation. I do wonder, I could probably also do this configuration then inside of this class, maybe, or at least these things. Let's just try it and see. Okay, so I made this utils HTTP client. Let's see, nothing fancy. Then this can go, and instead of do this utils HTTP client in here, um, this name, and instead of the regular HTTP client, I'll need utils HTTP client. I'm guessing um, I could do it like that. I'm going to do the same thing in the pet social shared SPA, and let's test it. Then the reason I'm filling this HTTP client with this utils HTTP client is so I don't have to change my implementation. Let's make this pet social HTTP client. Okay, let's test that. This can probably clean this duplication up somehow or make it, let's see, just going to add some console logs. I'll probably have to make this pet social client, and this is the event service from pet social. Let's run the Belgian Docus SPA, and hopefully we'll finally arrive at a solution. The events are coming up, that's a good sign. The metrics errors, which is also a good sign in my case, since it's using the correct 500 is what I want instead of a 404, since then I know it's using the correct endpoint. And here I see the console logs. Metric service is using 3005 and the event service is using 3001. Hallelujah. We solved the problem. I actually had something similar, but I called it HTTP service and inherit from an ASPA HTTP service. And then probably what I did, the mistake I did make then was add that service as scoped, that new HTTP service. And what ended up happening was kind of the same. So either it got overwritten by the HTTP service of another shared SPA project, or it was just not used in the where it should have been used, I guess. Anyway, I think that's all for this video. Took way longer than anticipated. And it's, yeah, I would think named HTTP clients would have been sufficient. So either typed or either named one, but apparently you have to type and name them. If you have set up like mine with existing services, you don't want to convert into HTTP client services. Okay, and the last thing that might be of interest is all these logs somehow. I don't want to be logging everything in here. Might be useful for debugging, but not. I don't want to put this live. Um, and it's not a matter of changing your app settings, unfortunately. Seems to be. I'm actually just going to put it in here. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Shared API. Sorry, shared SPA should be. Keep going wrong. Would be like this. It's the Microsoft extensions. I'm not going to do it for now because I first want to see what happens when I publish these things, whether it's still going to log everything or not. So, but you could do it if you need to. And maybe I'll do it in the future. That's all for HTTP clients. Maybe I want to say another thing. Or maybe there's another way to turn off this logging on the client specifically. Or, yeah, that's kind of unwanted behavior. All I'm doing is using the HTTP client, so I don't see why it's behaving differently now than when directly using the HTTP client. So logical handler, yeah,